Say it 20 times.
Don't tell me else. Oh, man. I saw them in the handbag. We should get started. Yeah. All right. Guys, we're gonna get started. We'll just do a simple introduction. Beth Feringer, if you don't know her, you're going to get to know her a lot better tonight. We're all really looking forward to seeing your work more and hearing more about your process. And we'll ask you to go ahead and get started.
All right, well, I am Bev. Welcome to Black Raven Pottery. A little bit of the background. First of all, I am a completely self-taught potter. I have no formal training whatsoever. I literally learned how to do pottery from YouTube. So I started back in, I think it was around 2005-ish. I don't really know the exact date. But a friend of mine, and some of you may know her, her name is Linda Michaelis. She was actually a Roycroft potter. And at Buffalo Audubon, Beaver Meadow in Java, they had a homestead festival each year, and she would set up with her pottery wheel and demonstrate some pottery. And I remember standing there watching her just like awestruck, because it was just so beautiful just watching her take this lump of goo and form it into this beautiful vessel. So I happened to say to Paul, my husband, I think I might want to do pottery. So he bought me a pottery wheel. And we set up this little corner in our garage. I had a pottery wheel and I had a slop sink. And Linda, the Roycroft potter, gave me a bag of clay and I just kind of went to it. And I was so extremely frustrated. I threw clay across my garage and I put everything away for probably a good year, if not two. And then I thought, you know what, I got everything, I might as well just stick with it, try to do it. And this is what happened. So,
So you figured it out.
I did. Thank you, YouTube. I would go in the house and I would watch somebody on YouTube, and like you can look for specific things. So I would search for centering clay on YouTube, and you have 1,000 different people centering clay on a pottery wheel, and they all do it differently. So I would watch a bunch of different people and I would try their technique, and if it didn't work, I'd go in and I'd try some, watch it and try somebody else's. And then eventually you kind of find that little comfort zone and you create your own technique and find what works for you. So that is how this whole thing started. It was not originally called Black Raven Pottery. When I first started, I had no intentions of this ever being a business. It was a side hobby for me. I'm a registered nurse and I was working full time when I started this. So this was kind of my release from my job. But after you get into it and you start making lots of things, you gotta do something with them. You can't just let them pile up. And then people would start buying things from me and I'm like, well, now I need a name. So initially I named it Tink. And it really, it had meaning to me, but then down the line, I didn't like it. But it had meaning because it was so exciting when you open the kiln. And I would always open the kiln when it's like way too hot to open it and take pieces out, but I did it anyways. I would open the kiln, we would take pieces out with, oven mitts because they're still too hot to touch. And we would put them on our dining room table, and all night long as they're cooling, you hear tink, 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 tink. So I named it Tink. So again, it had meaning to me. But then I had one customer that made an association with Peter Pan, and I'm like, you know what, I don't want that. So I searched for something else. I landed with Black Raven Pottery, only because I do like black ravens. I can't say they're my favorite bird. Sorry.
What?
But I landed on that name because it has like a primitive connotation, and I really liked the primitive kind of style. So that is how Black Raven Pottery came about. As you can see, you're kind of surrounded by all of my pieces. Everything in here is essentially made by me. There are some pieces that are actually made by Paul. Paul does a lot of my production work for me, and he only works on a slab roller. He does not work on a pottery wheel. So if you take a look around you, the pieces that are more of the earthy tones, like the blues and the greens and the browns, those are more of my commonplace pieces. Again, I'm very much into the environment, so I kind of lean towards those earthy tones. I do try to incorporate the environment into my pieces, so I have these little leaf fishes, and this leaf was literally outside that window. I stood on a ladder and I picked the leaf and I pressed it into the clay and I cut it out. And then I'm like, oh, I like that. So I stood on the ladder again and I picked another leaf. So these pieces here can be used as just like trinket dishes. They are unglazed, so they're not waterproof and definitely not food safe. Anything that is completely glazed is entirely food safe. You can cook in it, you can put it in the dishwasher, you can put it in the microwave, you can put it in the oven. So everything is completely safe. I do a wide range of items. Probably mostly because I get bored easily. So I'm not a production potter at all. I cannot sit at the pottery wheel and say, okay, today I'm gonna make mugs and I whip off 60 or 50 mugs. That's not me. If I want to sit at the pottery wheel all day long, I'll do like 4 or 5 mugs, but then I'm like, okay, what's next? I gotta transition to something else. So I'll move on to like bowls. So I'll make just a variety of different things all day long. Constantly challenging myself, which is how you get better. So if I just keep doing the same thing over and over, all my pots will look the same essentially. So you have to kind of push yourself a little bit and see what your limits are. Some things end up being an epic fail, and other things kind of surprise me. I follow a few people on YouTube. I follow a few YouTube channels. There's this lovely lady in England that makes these tiny little bottles, and I thought these were the coolest thing on the planet. So I decided I was going to make some of them, and then I turned them into that over here, huge bottles that I actually pressed a license plate into, and then made a lamp out of it. At the other end of the shop, there's some on that back shelf too that are just like dried flower. A lot of my items you will see have some kind of an impression on them. I have a really hard time reading plain. So I use mostly my mother-in-law's antique ornaments, and I use them to press in the corner. So all those little bottles that I just showed you, they have an impression of an embroidery on them, which makes your glazes. If I didn't get that impression on it, the glaze would be more of a flat green or a flat blue. Where if I have an impression on it, anytime there's a change in the texture of your surface, that makes the glaze great. You get different glaze colors for the glaze points. So like we get some brown undertones on the green one and on the blue one. So this here is my shop for sales. And then in the back is my studio where everything is made. So everything in here is made right back there. Unfortunately, we can only do part of the process back there. So we take the piece, we let it dry, and we fire the piece for the first firing back there. And then after that first firing, we discover this fire. Then we load everything into bins and we take them home with us because that's where we do all the glazing and glaze firing. So we have separate kiln in our garage at home. Love to have everything. But I keep saying I would have to pick out the locksmith next door to make it. And Jim the woodworker actually used to have this area here as his display area. And I believe prior to that, and probably around no more than this week, I believe prior to that was Roycroft Models. If anybody knows Janice McDuffie, so I've made a few of those, just because she's so incredible. So you can see, I talked about a lot of my earthy tones, and as I said before, I tend to get bored, so I've gone towards these bright colors here. This I just started probably just a couple of months ago, and this is, they're still glazes, but these are entirely hand painted. Where most of my other pots, I make them and I have a big vat of glaze that I will dip them into. So it's like a one dip single process. These ones are completely hand painted. So every different color I paint on there by hand. And then I'm literally drawing on the flowers and any decoration on each piece individually. So they're quite a bit more time consuming, but I love the different like pops of colors that I get out of those. And then on this round table, so these two top tiers here are a completely different firing process. So we'll start on the top layer. This is horsehair pottery, which the initial process is the same. You make the piece, you let it dry, you put it through a bisque fire, which just takes the rest of the moisture out of the pot. But then you don't put glaze on these. These have a coating of what is called terra sigillata, which is really just super refined watery clay. And it's painted on there, makes a nice coat, and then you shine it, buff it up to get a nice shine. Then these go into this outdoor kiln that my husband built me out of a garbage can. So we heat it up inside of there to about 1100-ish degrees. Take it out with a pair of tongs, and then you can strategically place pieces of horsehair. And that's what burns. It burns the carbon of the horsehair and leaves the black marks on the pot. So this one actually had some feathers burned into it as well. The problem with doing this process, number one, I have not mastered it yet, because I end up with such thermal shock from taking it from 1100 degrees out into the open air, and it cools too fast and it cracks. So this one here actually has just feathers burned into it. So still get a very nice effect. I'm just trying to protect the thermal shock problem. This piece here started out as a horsehair piece. This one had that terra sigillata that I talked about painted on it. And then I took it out of the outdoor kiln, I placed on my horsehair, and then as it cooled, the whole thing crackled like these tiny fine cracks. And that whole layer of horsehair fell, but I thought it was still really pretty. So I put it up for sale. So the second layer here, this is called Sagar pottery. And it's these red and black ones in front, and on the other side are like yellow orange ones. This piece back here is my 100% favorite piece ever. This Sagar pottery, again, starts out the same way. You make the piece, you dry it, you bisque fire it. Then I take it home and I use a chemical called ferric chloride, which I think is a chemical used for etching, and something else, and I can't remember what the other thing was. But I coat it with ferric chloride, and then I can use anything like, I don't remember what I used on this one. But you can use anything organic, you can use salt, you can use sugar. Use some Epsom salts, you can use sawdust, anything, and put them on your piece, and then I use in tin foil. So I usually use a couple layers of tin foil, and then this goes into my outdoor kiln, fires to, and here's the funny part. This one fired to about, I think it was 1120 degrees, and these were to 1150 degrees. So just that small temperature change, and you get a huge difference in your color.
So it's the ferric chloride that's creating the color along with the heat?
Yes. And this one here, like you can see, I burned a fern right into this one. All right, any questions at all on these?
A question on the kinds of mugs over here, so you notice some, you leave the slab, or you leave, and then some are, these are intentionally
Yes,
slab. I'm just wondering why that is.
just personal preference.
I thought you were gonna say that just to make it
Yeah,
better.
it's just to give each one a different variable. All of those mugs, well, 90% of those mugs over there are all made out of a slab of clay. And then it's formed around a cardboard tube. So literally we've used paper towel tubes and toilet paper tubes to make pottery. So I never throw anything away. Like I'm always looking at things going, how can you use that pottery? I press that into clay. But so most of those mugs here are made around this a plain cardboard form. And again, some of them we chose to overlap it to give it a different effect, and some of them we just made it. Most of those mugs over there are actually not my work, they are my husband's work. Aside from the handle. Because I rarely let he's learning. So it's kind of a mix between his work and my work, so.
Did you say the mugs are, they're waste, they're dishwasher and?
Dishwasher and microwave safe, yeah. And if you want to put your mug in the oven, you can do that. I find it funny that people ask me all the time, can this go in the oven? And I'm like, well, it came out of a kiln that was over 2,200 degrees, so probably, yeah. Ironically, though, they do say if you're putting pottery in your oven, that you should let it heat with the oven, not put it in a preheated oven.
Oh.
So, and then like we try to make some funkier things as well. You just kind of got to get away from the mainstream all the time, just make something that's fun. I actually had a guy that came in and ordered a bunch of these. He wanted to get family members. All right, so we can go in the back in the studio. That here is truly where everything happens. So I have actually two pottery needles, one we crammed under the table to make space for people. So I can do classes here. I actually have 2 people right now taking lessons, so I can do 2 people at a time. And then we also have the slab roller, which is primarily where Paul works. I do a little bit of slab stuff, but I mostly do wheel stuff. So when items are made, they go on this shelf behind you. So I can kind of show you the difference. So this was made yesterday. So this is called greenware. So it's just a freshly made piece. It's not completely dry. It's not even, the next stage would be called leather hard. This is not even leather hard because it's still kind of sticky to the touch. So leather hard is the stage that you can alter your pot. So I have this plate over here. This is considered leather hard because you can touch it, it's still fragile, but it's not sticky at all. So if I wanted to do any carving into my piece, it would be done at this stage. So I have a carving tool that makes like nice clean carving marks. And so this is leather hard. And then we have this that is called bone dry, which is just what it says. This is bone dry clay. Probably even more fragile than the leather card. I could actually just snip this off if I wanted to. So this is the stage where it would now go into the kiln.
How much does it take for it to get to the stage?
Really good question. I wish I had the perfect answer for you, but there's so many variables. A lot of it depends on the weather. So like in the summertime, things take forever down here to dry because it's such a damp building. There are times when I will set up a table outside to set pieces out in the sun just to get them to dry. In the winter time, with the furnace going, I can probably dry a piece in 2 or 3 days, but we turn the furnace way down when we leave, and I cover pieces with plastic. So in some cases, you don't want them to dry too quickly. So we're slowly, because otherwise if it dries too quickly, it tends to kind of twist and warp. So a lot of the drying time depends on the item. These items that are all covered, these are all student items, and they are only here once a week. So they will make them, like these 2 girls made these items today, but now I keep them covered with plastic until they're here next week, because I need to keep it so it doesn't go beyond that leather hard stage, so they can trim it and do any extra work.
Can you rehydrate it?
We actually do rehydrate, or we call it reclaim, all of our clay. So not a piece that you're working on, if it gets too dry, you can't rehydrate that. But any used scraps of clay, we rehydrate and reclaim. We kind of developed our own process. So we, like as I'm working on the wheel, I have a bucket next to me, so I'll just drop any scraps of clay in there. As that bucket gets full, we'll take that home with us, dump it into a bag, and then we dip that canvas bag into a bucket of water, so all of that dry clay absorbs all the water. And then we take it out and just hang it above the bucket to let the excess water drip out until it gets to a nice working consistency. And then we can wedge it back up into a nice block of clay.
You have a way to tell how dry it is, like when you're, other than feel and touch? Do you have any kind of meter that you
No,
use?
feel and touch is primarily how you judge it. It's basically by the coolness of the clay. So if it feels really cold still, it's likely got a lot of moisture left in there. If you fire a piece of clay that has a lot of moisture in it still, it's going to explode. How do I know that? Because I did it. So we've tried to refine the firing process. So we put it in the kiln now for the bisque fire, and we do, it's called candling. So we put it in there, we heat the kiln up to 200 degrees, and then we let it. So 200 degrees is where steam is going to develop if there's moisture in there. So it helps burn off any of that moisture that may be left in the clay. And then after that hour and a half or 2 hours, whichever I set it for, then we close up the kiln and it goes on for the remainder of the firing. So a bisque fire takes, in this kiln, it's about an 8-hour firing. With that candling process though, we're up to, 10 and a half, 11 hours of firing. And then it's at least that amount of time, if not longer, for cooling. So it's really a 2-day process to do a bisque firing. So, and then a glaze firing, again, is a full 2-day process. It fires a lot hotter. A glaze fire goes up to just under 2,300 degrees. And then the kiln that I have that has for glaze firing has really thick fire brick in it. So cools. All right, any questions at all?
Do you mix your own colors?
I do not. Initially, I really wanted to do that. And then when I started looking at it, I'm like, I need to be a chemist to do this. And I have no chemistry background really. And I'm actually perfectly happy with the commercial glazes that I buy. Most of them I end up not using by themselves. I tend to layer them with other glazes so I get different effects anyways. All right, so I thought, if you guys wanted, I can do a demonstration on the pottery wheel. And if anybody else wants to try it, you can have your hand at it.
I was gonna ask what your working machine is. Are you every day or?
I actually just retired from my nursing job in January. So since then, I have been here. We actually started out Tuesday through Saturday time of year. There's not a whole lot of traffic here. So we cut it down now to Wednesday through Saturday, typically 11 to 4. And then during the holidays, we'll add Tuesdays on again. So usually I'm trying to use this time of year when traffic isn't heavy to do my lessons. And then once October 1st hits, October 1st through Christmas is crazy busy. So I try not to do lessons during that time. Because I need to, keep my shelves here stocked full. Plus I do the 3 shows that the Roycroft has on campus here, so.
How much you charge for shows or for classes?
It's on my website.
Okay.
That's tell you off the
I
top
can
of my
relate
head.
to
That's okay.
I do 3 different levels, we'll call them. I do just a plain, simple 2-hour session where I give you a demonstration and then I'll get you a ball of clay and I'll be for guiding. My 2-hour people make up to 3 bowls.
Okay.
And then I offer a more formal, usually one-on-one 4-week session or a 6-week session.
Okay.
All right, so I will, let me get some water running. I always use warm water and take forever. So while that is warming. Oh, usually most of my kids are jumping down. So this table that I'm working on here, this table is called a wedging table. And wedging is the process of preparing your clay to use on the pottery wheel. So it's kind of, I always equate it to like kneading bread. But with wedging, what I'm trying to do is get out any air bubbles that may be in there. And I'm trying to make my clay a nice even consistency, so there's not hard spots and soft spots in there. I'm using a really big piece of clay. I'm like, oh, can you work that for me? So I'll just do just a real basic piece. So both of my wheels are electric, so they just run with this little pedal that's almost like a sewing machine.
We're not gonna get hit with that, right?
I cannot make any guarantees.
Here, Stace.
Get a little closer. So some people say that the term throwing pottery came just from that, from throwing your clay on the pottery wheel. I think it's made up, but
I think it's probably from the frustration of learning how to do it.
yeah, really. When I threw my clay across the garage, right? So the first stage in making a pot is to center your clay on your pottery wheel. So, and by centering, I mean your ball of clay has to be exactly in the center. And exactly round center. You use a lot of water when doing pottery because you need to have your clay constantly slippery. So your hands slide on it. Otherwise, your hands will stick to your clay and then they'll just continually try to stretch your clay. So there is a center ball clay. What I'm doing now is compressing the clay on the bottom of the pot. If your pot is going to crack, that's the most likely place it's going to crack is on the bottom. So we compress the clay, which means I'm really just pushing all those clay particles tightly together. So I was working at a really nice fast speed up until this point. I'm now ready to pull up walls, so I'm going to slow it way down.
What's the thickness you try to get it to?
It depends on the piece I'm making. So sometimes I like to make, like if it's a mug, sometimes I like to make a nice thick, robust mug and I'll put like a really thick, bulky handle on it. And then other times I prefer just a thinner, more delicate mug. But the idea is to maintain the same thickness throughout the entire pot. One thing I would still like to do with pottery is to try using a kick wheel. I've never used one before. When I first saw a kick wheel, it has a spinning disc on the bottom and you have to kick it with your foot like this. And I'm like, how do you do pottery while you're, but you don't get to continually kick, I found out. You get it going and then it spins on its own for a while. I'm also a backwards potter. So you can see I spin my wheel in a clockwise direction. Most potters spin their wheel counterclockwise.
Are you left-handed?
I am not.
See, I would do that now.
Yeah, it's $1 million question. Are you left-handed? But I am. I tried and I couldn't do anything. And then my friend Linda said, try spinning your wheel the opposite way. And it worked. I don't know why.
You're left-handed.
I guess. So most pots will start as a basic cylinder. And then from this point, you can alter the pot into any different shape. I could stretch this whole thing out into a like a wide rimmed bowl, or I could belly it out and like narrow the top to make it more like a vase. We're actually going to stretch this one out. So starting with a basic cylinder, and you can end up with something entirely different. Fancy this up a little bit. So there's just a basic bowl. So you can see at the bottom, there's this skirting on the bottom. When this gets to that leather hard stage, I can then turn this pot upside down and I can trim off all that skirting and kind of reshape the bottom of the pot.
Do you use just like a knife to cut it off then at that point?
No, I have trimming tools. They're called ribbon tools because your clay should be at such a consistency that when you trim it off, it comes off. A lot of times with pottery, it's all about timing. So like timing with the drying process. So sometimes when my piece is at the exact dryness where I should trim it, I'm not here. So I try to keep things covered and then I'll uncover it when I get here and then it still doesn't dry enough by the time I leave. So it's a process of covering and uncovering several times. So this piece will just kind of sit on this bat until it's at a leather hard stage. So I'm gonna use my wire tool and I'm gonna cut it free from the bat, but I'm not gonna take it off of, and this is the bat, the green thing is called my bat. Oh. Well, they come out of all different materials. This is just a plastic, simple to use. The problem with them is they do warp. These ones, shoot, I can't remember what these are made of. Something like composite board. I use these if I'm making a wide bottomed pot with a pie plate. I will use this bat because you don't have to cut them free from this bat. As they dry, they pop right off. That being said, though, I cannot leave a pot with all this skirting on the bottom to be trimmed because by the time it pops off here, it's too dry to trim it. So I have to do all that trimming while it's on the bat. So it's already in the shape that I want it in as it dries and pops off. Any other questions?
Do you have a favorite part of the process? Do you like the wheel or the glazing or the trimming?
I think the trimming is probably my favorite part. I feel like I can almost entirely alter a pot just by turning it over, trimming it. So we rounded appearance and make like this really narrow bottom on it if I wanted to. All right, any other questions? Did anybody want to try the pottery? I think. That's right. Yeah. Why not?
I know, she makes it look super easy. I guess we'll find out. Right?
There are aprons over there if you want one.
It's washable, isn't it?
Yeah, it's dirt.
It's dirt.
It's dirt, it'll come out.
I complain that the house is old dusty all the time. My husband explained to me that the world is made of dirt, so. Sure. No. I'm washable. I thought you should give me a pun.
What's that?
I said it's drinking a pun.
That is what I tell a lot of my students.
You want me to do that?
When I have a student that kind of flops the pot.
Oh, no, I wasted it. It's just dirt. I think it's so.
Can you? I don't always throw away pieces that get mistaken.
I did earlier.
I was looking for that. To the sunlight.
All right, so get your hands and your slate. So, and I want you to just try to center. So, yep, so you're gonna get wheel spinning. And it's usually at a very fast.
All right, I got him.
There you go, that's the easy way.
And you're gonna take your right elbow.
Yeah, I haven't seen that thing pop up with chats.
I don't know where it is.
This is the first time I've done it on my phone. I've done Zoom on my
It's 90-degree angle.
computer.
And your wrist. So your heel of your hand is gonna
Oh,
be
for the
at
under the
5
bra button?
elbows
Foot.
and brace.
Okay, so that was.
Center.
Alright, so you should be good.
Okay.
Idea is to apply the same amount of pressure from the side.
She's doing a good job.
This hand on the side, using the heel of the hand, this hand on top. Oh, let go. And you're gonna link your hands, so like grab your right thumb versus your left hand. And you have to continually add water, so it's nice and steady. It's not. You need to be completely braced. Both your arms have to be braced into your body for a minimal split. So what you're trying to do is you move the clay, not let the clay move you. Add water, add water, add water.
Just hang out.
You right there. It's not nearly that. That's actually pretty good. So in theory, to center clay, if you apply the same amount of pressure from the side as you do on the top, your clay has nowhere to go in the center.
It feels smoother now.
And I can hear it, it's really, really dry. So your hands always have to slide against the clay.
That feels actually pretty smooth right now.
So do a really soft, easy release.
And slow it down.
Not necessarily. Okay, so there's a pretty much centered ball, right? A little one. Okay, now you're gonna open a hole in the center.
Okay.
And I will stress the center. So you kind of left yourself a nice little mark. I usually use one thumb. There's people that use their fingers. You can use 2 thumbs. But you're gonna press your thumb down in there. Yep. You're gonna press your thumb down in until you feel like you are between 1/4 and 1/2 inch of going all the way through to the back.
Oh, look at that.
You don't want to go all the way through. You're gonna stop before you go all the way through. And if it gets dry, and it will in there, just easy soft release, add more water. Well, she can sure. Somebody asked me that today. And I thought of the answer. I think you learned all. So once you have your clay centered, your job is to then keep it centered
We're not
as you're
centered.
doing everything else on it.
So I'm about an inch from the bottom or 3/4 of an inch right now, I think.
So you can open the floor on your pot then. So it's gonna be basically the same hand position with your thumb in there. And you're gonna pull it open to make a floor on your pot.
Okay.
So, nope, down the bottom. So you're working the floor
Oh, I want to kind of,
towards you to open the floor.
oh, thank you for the water. I've got something there.
So now you would compress the floor of your pot and that'll help get rid of that lump in there. Just because I wanted to. Yeah. A friend of mine was a Lord daughter and I loved watching her. So I told my husband, I think I want to try that. So we got in the car and we set up this little spot in front of our garage. And it wasn't all good at the start. I remember, because I worked as a nurse all the time.
It's getting kind of lucky here.
Slow down. Slow, slow, slow.
I got way off of.
Oh, yeah, and you tore it
I
apart.
tore it apart. I tried.
That was good.
What was the first thing that you made?
I probably should have brought that with me. I have a couple of bowls at home that were from my first items that I made. I'm sure I found them.
So you're gonna put that in the garbage thing then?
I have this one bowl at home though, that is my absolute favorite bowl. It's only about this big. And when I made it, the rim was all sorts of wonky. So and wonky is a pottery word. Official pottery. So because my rim was so uneven, I wanted to cut the rim off to make it even. And as I tried to do that, it came out like this all jagged edges on the top. And I
You don't want
wanted
the clay going into
I
the
get
line. Yeah, that's why the clay trap underneath. Yep.
I just did one different colored stones. Yeah, that's my favorite piece. We've also done the Empty Bowls Project. Have you ever heard of the Empty Bowls Project? So it's a huge fundraiser to raise money and awareness of world hunger. So we held an Empty Bowls Project 3 or 4 years in a row up until COVID hit. But we would make, literally Paul and I would make over 200 bowls, soup bowls. And then we had a soup luncheon event and people would come and we had all of our bowls displayed on the table and they were all priced their appropriate price. And people would come and purchase their bowl, buy a bowl and take their bowl at home. So the idea is that every household has an empty bowl. So in essence of hunger. So once COVID hit, we had to stop doing that. We may eventually get back to it, but it grew every year, so it's difficult to keep up without having other potters. I ended up having a couple other potter friends that donated bowls, but it was like maybe 20 bowls altogether that donated, so it was kind of a drop in the bucket compared to what we needed. All right, any questions at all?
I thought that was really fun.
What's your age limit for
16 and over.
16?
Yeah. Always, like he always does stuff with just clumps of clay, and he wanted to sit at the pottery wheel, and he rather kind of blew me away. He was like, "It's not." But, all right, well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
I just asked if there were any questions. No one responded, so
So I know what I was using.
I guess we're.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello,